I think that's a fantastic segue. One of the things that you clearly experienced when you ran for president is the power of the corporate media. I think it's one of the biggest hindrances for us to really build any type of sustainable movement. We see what they're doing on YouTube, for example, when they are crushing the algorithm now deliberately on behalf of mega corporations, whether it was you, whether it was Andrew Yang, whether it was even Tulsi Gabbard, there was, you know, obviously they did it to Bernie when he ran the first time, much more difficult to do it when he has the type of brand and name recognition the second time around. Nevertheless, anybody who has a nonpartisan, non-corporate message that they are trying to convey, and especially in a circumstance like this right now, as we're seeing, the power of the media, I still don't think people truly grasp how significant that is between MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. The reach is tremendous, and they pay a lot of money to have it out there. As you know, you travel a lot. Anytime you're in the airport, it's either CNN, most likely, or Fox News, depending on where you are. And what people may not know is, you know, whether it's News Corp or Time Warner, they are paying these airports to play those channels when they're there. So siphoning through that message is very difficult. And I would love to hear your thoughts on what that experience has been like and what you've learned from that going to this point.
Well, it's a political media industrial complex, much as you said. And a lot of this derives from the Telecommunications Act in 1996, signed by Bill Clinton, which corporatized the media. You have the same kind of monopolistic power when it comes to our news organizations that you have in every other area where a few companies, whether it's military industrial complex, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and Boeing, whether it's a few food companies, whether it's a few chemical companies, whether it's a few big ag companies, whether it's a few pharmaceutical companies, whether it's a few health insurance companies, these corporate behemoths that form this matrix of corporate aristocracy or plutocracy. And our media companies are no different, but even at least as dangerous as all of the others, because it is monopolizing the flow of information. When I was a child, the same company was not allowed to own the newspaper and the radio and the TV, because there was a protection of the diversification of information. Now, when that argument was made against the Telecommunications Act, interestingly enough, Colin Powell's son, Michael Powell, at the FCC said, oh no, the diversification will be protected because of the internet. And that's why the net neutrality issue is such a big deal. And everything that you were saying, they're even coming for you on the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why people like Greenwald and Taibbi and everybody's going nuts about that even on the internet. But even that brings up questions. Well, do you really want Donald Trump on Twitter? Isn't the world better without him? These are very serious issues, but I believe that we have to really make independent media we must protect, and we must do everything that we can to support each other, yourselves included. There is a huge progressive, independent voice in America, but you know, it's almost, you could liken it a little bit when you were talking about the settlements and how the settlements have made such non-contiguous parts of the Palestinians, because it's like a little bit here, a little bit there, and everybody's separated from each other. And that's how Israel seeks to keep control. That's how the corporate power seeks to control us in America. We have these corners of progressivism and these corners of independent media and independent voices. And I think that we need to think more ourselves in terms of a resonant field, because when you actually look at where the American people, it's kind of like you were talking about Israel. Netanyahu does not represent the consciousness of the American people. I mean of the Israeli people. The U.S. government is actually, in issue after issue, they have shown that the American people are actually left of center. The American people want Medicare for all. The American people are not, when Martin Luther King said that the American people are far more compassionate than the US government. So yeah, what you're saying is true. The corporate media, we call them the mainstream media, and they are just a voice box for the corporate establishment. That's what CNN is. That's what MSNBC. Before I ran for president, I was very naive about that. I thought MSNBC were our guys. Now, some of the individual journalists are very lovely and ethical, but what I saw running for president, they are the operational tool for the politics of personal destruction, so that anyone the political establishment wants to get rid of, Anderson Cooper and et al. Will make sure that the job gets done.
I think they also don't do it fast enough. You know, a lot of times people don't notice things changing until it's too late. That's why MSNBC of 10, 12 years ago, when you had Phil Donahue, when you had Ed Schultz, when you had Dylan Ratigan, it was a completely
Keith Olbermann.
Yeah, before he went off the deep end, yes, Keith Olbermann. Listen, Keith Olbermann's closing monologue about Hillary Clinton when she wouldn't drop out of the race in 2008 was one of the best things I've ever seen.
He was brilliant.
He was.
And Dylan, as you were saying, Dylan was so great on economics. Greedy Bastards is the name of his book.
But you can't have that kind of message right now. And I think the reason they can't is because they know they're losing control of the dialogue. I think that was that probably, as much as anything, I think is the greatest impact of, what has happened over the past 5 years, due to the shifting in the political narrative. Medicare for all is now part of the common vernacular. It never was, but now it is. And you can't put it back in the box. Thanks to Bernie, thanks to Andrew Yang, we now have UBI as a common talking point, knowing that a universal basic income is essentially Social Security for all. And there's a lot of different ways you can approach that. A lot of people love the idea of having a federal jobs guarantee as expressed through the teachings of modern monetary theory. And of course, we got to save our planet. I mean, this is out of sight, out of mind now with the type of things that we need to do. But the corporate state, and they use the corporate media as their sort of their driver of the narrative to try to keep us, down. But I just think
we like to think we don't have state TV, but we sort of do.
Oh, we certainly do.
We do. Well, that's what's so interesting. Like we've always sort of looked down on that. We've talked down on that, like what China or what the Soviet Union had was state media, and I'm thinking, yeah, so do we. It's just corporate sponsored, but it's still state media.
It's political media industrial complex. I saw that very clearly running.
Yeah.
And I do think that one of the things that we really should talk about is the importance of coalition building. I think it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. I think it's the only way that this is going to work in terms of long-term sustainability. Jen had her 50th birthday live stream the other day.
Happy birthday, Jen.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we had when I say a who's who.
Oh, it was so cool.
Just people. I mean, Nina Turner obviously was the queen of them all who came on the live stream, and it was wonderful.
Well, because he surprised me. I didn't know he asked her to come. I would have told him to leave her alone. She's busy.
No, but Nina came on. We had Bo, the fifth column. We had Vosh. We had Tim Black. We had
Steve Grumbine.
It was
really cool.
And it was just really great to recognize that so many people wanted to be there. And check your egos at the door. This is about a cause. We raised a nice amount of money for what is going to be these care packages we're doing as part of GenCore, which is our service organization here in South Florida. And it's to help people that desperately need it. And having that type of a reach in terms of that coalition build, I think is one of the most important things we can do going forward. And we see that happening through a non-corporate, non-partisan labor movement. You want to make it a labor of love? I'm cool with that too.
Oh yeah. And John reminded me, Chelsea Manning.
Yes.
Chelsea Manning sang happy birthday to me. I was just like, that was the coolest thing ever, I think. I'm like, oh my God, that's Chelsea Manning. Like that was really cool.
And I am curious as to your thoughts on coalition building and how important you see that being for us.
Well, crossing tribal lines. That's the thing.
That's what I said a few minutes ago, that we needed to work more together, that we're in this non-contiguous corners. That's my point. And I liken it to the Palestinians who are kept separate from each other because they all have to stay in one area. And that was my point. But also I think in our country, when it comes to progressive independent voices, leftist voices, we have to take responsibility for that, in the sense that so many leftists are into attacking other leftists. I mean, the cancel culture, I know my politics, that, even though people these days will tell you what your politics are, I know what my politics are. But if I don't use the words the way somebody wants me to use the words, if I don't say the phrase they want me to say, then the most vile vitriol is thrown at me, and from people who I agree with you. Why are you, you know,
Yeah.
so a lot of it is ours to realize. And the other issue, not just coalition building, but electoralism. There's too much cynicism on the left about electoral politics. And I know you know this, Jen. When the reason we don't have policies that support working class people in this country is because there aren't enough working class people making the policies. But working class people so often don't even get to win the primary, because when Chuck Schumer calls to see if you should be the candidate, he wants to know whether or not you can self-fund. So I endorse a lot of candidates through, somebody can find out more at candidatesummit.com.
Speaking to Elijah Manley out there, who is on and trying to get your attention. He's a big fan of yours, and he's one of our local. I don't know if are you familiar with Elijah Manley, but he is running for state house here. It's an open seat. He is one of our true like activist progressives down here in South Florida, and he is also the head of our Democratic Progressive Caucus in Broward.
And I think we
well, maybe Wendy, if you could come here and get chat on for me.
Yeah,
Elijah is one of the greatest hopes for progressive politics in South Florida.
Yeah.
Well, let me know. So I just feel that people, like we did this thing called candidatesummit.com. Could you do this for me, Wendy? Are you coming in here? Thank you. Can you get me on chat so I can see?
Hi, Wendy.
Yeah. Hi, Wendy. Can you get me on?
Let me try.
Thank you. But you know, over 50,000 people saw the candidate summit that we did. If every person who watched, even people watch till the end, had given $1, it would have been such a boost to these 14 candidates. And I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know. There's a disconnect for too many people, and then it's a catch-22 because they're so cynical about politics. But in a way, the Republicans are better at knowing. You got to replace the people you don't like with the, thank you so much, Wendy, with the people that you do like.
My thoughts on it are always that we need to be doing inside and outside simultaneously. I am also very cynical and not so thrilled with electoral politics, but I do it because that's the menu, that's what's there, and that's the option. And so I'm living with it, whether I participate in it or not. So I choose to participate to the level that I do. But I also think it's equally important to have our people on the outside doing what they're doing.
Well, that's democracy.
I'm all of it.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying to me. Yes, of course. Our activism on the outside is what pushes people on the inside. But at the same time, you're going to have to get different people in there. Yeah. And one of the things that, I mean, that's really ultimately, you can't, you know, at some point, it's not just about pushing them. It's about get out of that chair and let me sit there. Let some of us sit there. And I just see these incredible people running, incredible progressive voices who are running. Yeah. And it makes me sad to see how, you know, the people on the left side of the American political spectrum are big on showing up for the hot and sexy presidential campaigns.
Exactly.
But the Republicans, oddly enough, are more psychologically sophisticated about knowing every school board election matters. The state house election matters. Yep. The things you were talking about, the boycott, making a BDS boycott illegal. Well, that's on a state level. Yeah. A lot of people on the left couldn't be bothered to see who their state legislator is, to really see what's going on in their local and in their state politics, or even the midterms. Or even if they want to work on the midterms, they wait till the corporatist Democratic candidate is already chosen in the primary. Right. They need to get involved during they wait very early right now.
They wait for their spoon-fed candidate to be handed to them like packaged.
And then they complain.
Well, you couldn't have said it better. And the thing that I've been trying to tell people is, if you're in the GOP, they value the committee precinct person probably more than anybody else.
You're right.
If you guys are not ready, and I would just use this as an example, there are no guarantees, but knock on wood, if you want to see somebody like Nina Turner run for president in 2028, then you need to start preparing right now for how you are going to build an infrastructure on the ground to make it possible. Why? because Pete Buttigieg is already preparing to run for president again right now, and that's why he's in the position that he's in.
Just shoot
They
me.
don't take these positions lightly. They take them because they think that's going to get them to the next level. Elise Stefanik is not the third-ranking GOP member I think she's 37, 38 years old. She's not in that position because she's thinking that that's where she's going to stop. She's going to try to run for the U.S. Senate in the state of New York.
I'm sorry, but Pete Buttigieg is the Spice Girls of politics.
It is what it is, but that's what this is for the majority of people, especially the corporate-minded people who get into politics. This is a career. This is what this is. You can hate it all you want, but unless you're willing to fight, like you said, where you need to fight, you have to get involved with things that are not sexy. It's very easy to rally for the presidency, but that was the biggest mistake that Bernie's movement made between 2016 and 2020. The infrastructure was not set in place the way it needed to be in order for him to make sure that the nonsense that went on in Iowa, especially, if they had an infrastructure in place within the Iowa Democratic Party, they would have never been able to get away with the nonsense that they got away with. And that is why the whole thing was, sent into complete turmoil. They, as you can see, the one state that was smart enough to put these things in place was the state of Nevada. And that is why Bernie absolutely crushed in that state. And then, of course, the progressives took over the state party. I would use that as more or less what I would call you call it a blueprint. That is the blueprint of more or less what you would want to follow. Whatever
to take control of your state party.
Yeah,
for us to take control. I mean, that's what has to happen, is that the progressives have to take control of their state parties.
Which is also why I think Amy Villela, who is running again for Nevada's first congressional district, I think she's going to have an excellent chance to win now that an infrastructure in place within the Democratic Party that isn't going to work against her.
Exactly.
Forget even working for her.
I agree with you guys 100% on this.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.